Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name's Christina Kent, and I'm a fine artist based out of San Francisco. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through an exercise that I like to do when I'm trying to figure out how to compose a painting. What we're going to do is we're going to take the same image and we're going to create 3 different compositions by cropping the image in different ways. And just as a quick note, I'm super excited to share that I recently launched a new portrait painting course on my website. In this course, we take the portrait and we break it down into simple light and shadow shapes. Then we add nuance to create and fully resolve the portrait. So if you want to see the step-by-step, real-time process for my portrait painting, be sure to check that out. For these sketches, I'm going to be using acrylic gouache paint, and I'm going to be working in white and blue, but you could work with white and pretty much any dark color. I'll be using a small flat brush, and we'll be painting in my Moleskine art sketchbook. I also have a jar of water for cleaning my brush. Here's the image that I'm going to be working with. It's a photo that I took of downtown San Francisco at golden hour. The scene itself has a lot of stuff going on, and it offers a lot of ways for us to crop the street, the car, the sky, the buildings, things like that. You can follow along with me in this, or you can take one of your own photos and try cropping it in different ways. But I recommend using a photo that has a lot of elements in it like this, giving us a lot of opportunities for different croppings. And when you're working on these exercises, it's really helpful to take your image and convert it into black and white. So if you have your image on your phone or on your computer, I'd recommend putting it in black and white so that it's easier to see the light and shadow shapes. For this exercise, I'm going to do 3 compositions: a square composition, a rectangular landscape orientation composition, and a rectangular portrait orientation composition. You don't have to use different aspect ratios for the compositions. You could do 3 different square compositions and just focus on different parts of the image, but I liked the idea of changing up the aspect ratio to see how those different compositions would feel. I start by laying down a mid-tone color for the square and the rectangles that I've sketched out. And my idea here is that I want to do a 3-value study for each of these little sketches. So the idea is that I will just use white, dark blue, and light blue to map out where the values are in each of these compositions. And the reason for this is because I want to understand the compositions in terms of large shapes. So I don't want to get too stuck in the details. And that's one of the reasons why I'm working on such a small format too. I don't want to get stuck in the details, but instead I want to see what are the overall shapes. Because I feel like if you have a strong composition when you look at just the big shapes, then once you go in and add the details, you're starting from a good foundation, so the painting will be strong. I start with the square composition, and for this composition, I focus more on the car that's coming towards us, the buildings that are getting hit by the light in the back, and I'm trying to get a bit of all of those compositional elements into the picture. So as I'm looking at the image, I'm squinting and I'm asking myself, what are the light shapes, what are the dark shapes, and what are the midtones? Squinting also helps me to group these shapes together so that I don't get too wrapped up in the details and I can just focus on the large overall forms. With these sketches, I like to start with a midtone and then put in the dark shapes and then put in the light shapes, but you don't have to do it in that order. If you find it easiest to put in the light shapes first, then go for it. Just do what you feel works best for you. Once I've got a really simplified version of the shapes for the square composition, then I move on to the rectangle that's like in landscape format. And for this composition, I decide to expand the image out a little bit, so I keep the overall sort of height of the composition similar to that of the square one, but then I allow for more of those buildings on the right side to sort of start to stretch into the foreground of the image. I'm continuing to squint, I'm continuing to simplify, trying to think in terms of big shapes. Once I'm finished with the landscape orientation rectangle, then I move on to the portrait orientation one. And for this one, I kind of take my square composition and crop it in a little bit closer. So we're getting a closer view of those buildings that are further off in the distance, and we're also getting more space for the building that's getting hit by the light and for the sky. As with the others, I'm squinting, I'm thinking in terms of big shapes, and you can see I'm really simplifying all of the things in the composition. So if you hadn't seen the reference image, you might not even know that these were buildings or that this was a cityscape. And that's kind of the point. It's less about thinking about what the objects are and more about seeing the big shapes and understanding how they work together, understanding how they feel. And that's why I think sketches like these can be so helpful, because for me, it helps me get this like intuitive grasp of composition. Now that the sketches are done, let's compare all of these compositions. Here are the completed thumbnail sketches, and so let's just look at each one in turn. So let's start with the square sketch. So squares, I usually think of squares as being a very balanced composition. They're kind of calm, and sometimes they can be a little boring. I think with the fact that we have these diagonal lines in the image makes it a little bit more exciting. So we have like diagonal lines often give someone a sense of movement, while horizontal lines can be a bit more calming. So I think even though we have a square composition, which I think is a bit more calming, a bit more peaceful, the dynamic lines kind of add some energy and add some interest. So I do like the square composition. I think it's quite nice. And then going to this rectangular composition, I think I'm really drawn to this kind of feeling, like this large expanding shape that we have here, created by the rooftops of the buildings and the cars that are lined up along the street. I think that creates this really interesting feeling of like forward motion. And it kind of goes with how I feel oftentimes when I'm downtown and I'm seeing all the cars moving and lots of people going from place to place. So I think to me that gives me more of a feeling of the energy of the city, and I really like that. And then moving to the portrait orientation. So now we have a rectangle, but it's taller on the vertical side. I think that this one has a strong feeling of uplift. So I like the emphasis on these vertical lines and these shapes all kind of like moving up towards the sky. It makes me think of the tall buildings in the city. And that I think is interesting and is, something that maybe I would want to think more about. So I like that. I like when I am in the city and when I'm downtown, I'm thinking a lot about these tall buildings and how they're kind of towering above me. I also like the feeling of moving upward. There's just something sort of joyful or maybe ambitious about it too. Maybe it's talking about ambition. I don't know, but as you can see, you can read into each of these compositions and you can get different feelings from each one, which is one of the things that I love about how we choose to crop and compose an image. And I hope that this has really illustrated just the power of composition, even if kind of our viewpoint and our focal point is exactly the same. Just the way that we crop the image can have a big impact on the composition and can help create different feelings in the same subject matter that we're looking at. So I hope that this has given you ideas for your own work, and I would highly recommend doing a similar exercise, taking a reference photo of something that you are interested in painting and just try cropping it in several different ways and see how that impacts the results. And I think like each of these could make a really cool painting. It's not that one is necessarily better than the other. They just feel different, and I think that that's something that's really fun to explore. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And as always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for supporting this channel and making these videos happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.